Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I'm Zeckthar,
And I'm Yuksen.
and we are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires, yet for the next couple of months, we will be discussing the greatest disaster in the history of the Imperium of Man. That's right, folks, the Horus Heresy.
Indeed. Now, this will be interesting, because instead of covering a particular faction, we will be following a timeline. Starting from the Great Crusade, we will end at the Siege of Terra.
That's right. But before we start, if you like our stuff, feel free to follow, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really like our boxes, feel free to join our membership program, like Sir Benderbyton, our very first member.
Quite right, brother, and thank you to our newest member, Hermes Skirty. Well, what are we going to talk about today, Zeckthar?
Well, today we're going to discuss the Schism of Mars and that dreadful civil war that took place on the Red Planet. Before we do, we have to go back to when the Emperor first visited Mars. You see, while the Emperor had declared Mars fairly autonomous from imperial law, there were some that lived on Mars who thought of the Master of Man as an usurper of Mars' power. Not only this, but as the Great Crusade rolled on, the belief that the Emperor was the Omnissiah had begun to wane as well, which caused even more problems. I mean, by the time of the Horus Heresy, Mars was not so faithful a bunch of followers of the Imperium. Yet it is a little more complicated than that. The Magi of each hive city and factorias began to shift to different sides of an obvious change in ideals. The climate on Mars was indeed full of discontent during this tumultuous time in the days just before Horus openly declared his rebellion against the Emperor. There were tense relations between the various Mechanica Magi who governed Mars with sporadic outbreaks of espionage and violence committed against the various forge cities that represented the primary socio-political units of Mars. There were even unconfirmed suspicions that the various Titan legions of the Collegia Titanica, the most potent military forces available to the Mechanicum, had already secretly chosen sides in case of a potential conflict. Indeed, a large faction in the Martian Mechanicum, led by Fabricator General Kelbor Hall, had come to believe that the Emperor was a false idol and not the true Omnissiah promised by the machine god, who had yet to reveal himself. More importantly, Kelbor Hall harbored great resentment against the Emperor for his conversion of Mars into little more than a weapons factory to supply the forces of the Great Crusade, and his ban on certain types of technological research, particularly artificial general intelligence. All of this swirled around the planet like a highly flammable gas, just waiting for a match. And that match had a name: Fabricator General Kelbor Hall. Take it away, Yuksen.
Now, before anything else, I should explain his viewpoint on the Emperor. Kelbor Hall was present when the Emperor first arrived on Mars, and while the Master of Mankind was widely celebrated by most of his colleagues, he was deeply distrustful of the Terran warlord, because he is smarter than the average pancake bear.
Indeed.
Hall and his followers were among those who refused to see the Emperor as the avatar of the Omnissiah, instead only seeing a false prophet who had subordinated the Mechanicum under the Imperium's heel with lies and falsehoods. Kelbor Hall feared that the Emperor and his forces were going to strip away the autonomy Mars had enjoyed dating back all the way to the Dark Age of technology. Kelbor Hall believed the Emperor offered peace with one hand whilst keeping a dagger behind his back with the other. In reality, the Emperor's offer was an ultimatum: join with me, or I will simply take what I need from you. 2 Terran centuries passed after the signing of the Treaty of Mars, and Kelbor Hall rose to a position of much prominence within the Mechanicum. He became the Fabricator General of Mars, the master of the Red Planet's mightiest forge city, Olympus Mons. Kelbor Hall gathered around him a circle of like-minded magi, including Urtzi Malevolus, Lucas Crom, the master of Mondus Gamma Forge, and his trusted personal emissary and confidant, Melgator. The Fabricator General knew he should be proud of his accomplishments, for he had uncovered more of the secrets of technology than any before him and had overseen the longest reign of increasing production quotas in the Mechanicum's history. But pride, like many other emotional responses, had all but vanished as the organic cogitator once housed in his skull had been gradually replaced with synthetic synapses and efficient conduits for logical thought. The Fabricator General was over 80% augmetic by the final days of the Great Crusade, and barely anything that could be called human remained of his birth flesh. At the outset of the Horus Heresy, the Warmaster Horus sent Regulus, a Mechanicum representative who had already thrown in his lot with the Warmaster, to Mars to secure the tentative support of the Fabricator General of the Mechanicum for his dreams of a rebellion. Kelbor Hall was skeptical at first, for the Emperor had been brought to his forge over 2 centuries earlier, and Kelbor Hall had been forced to bend the knee to him. The ruler of the lowly Terran tribes had made empty promises of an equal role in his grand crusade of conquest, but that vaunted equality had never materialized in the Fabricator General's view. The Mechanicum continued to toil in its myriad manufactorums and orbital shipyards across the galaxy's forge worlds to provide the Emperor's armies with the needed weapons of war, but received nothing for their efforts but platitudes. Kelbor Hall knew Horus Lupercal was a warrior of vision, but Kelbor Hall wanted to know what he could offer in addition to platitudes. Regulus explained to the Fabricator General that much had happened since the Emperor took his leave of the expeditionary forces after his success of the Ulanor Crusade and the installation of his favorite son Horus as the Warmaster and his proxy in command of the Great Crusade. He assured Kelbor Hall that alignments had shifted and that new powers emerged from the shadows, offering their aid to those with the strength of vision to heed them. Horus Lupercal was one such individual, and he was now assuredly a friend of the Mechanicum. When it came time to strike at the Emperor and his Imperium, Horus guaranteed to be a friend of Mars as long as the Fabricator General gave his loyalty and his manufacturing capabilities over to the cause of the traitors. Horus also required the Fabricator General to quash any dissent amongst his own tech priests so that the forces of the Warmaster would be able to launch their bid for supremacy within the Sol system without fear of counterattack. Any factions loyal to Terra must be brought to heel or destroyed before the Warmaster's forces reach the Sol system. The Fabricator General informed Regulus that the Warmaster had asked much of him and the Mechanicum already. Mechanicum had already delivered, for they had ensured that material and weapons were priority tasks to those expeditionary fleets of the Great Crusade that the Warmaster favored and delayed shipments to those not aligned with him. But the Mechanicum had no desire to trade one autocrat for another. Regulus assured Kelbor Hall that the Warmaster pledged to return the Martian Empire to its former glory, and furthermore, he swore to withdraw any non-Mechanicum forces from all of the Forge worlds after the Emperor had been overthrown. To allay the Fabricator General's misgivings, the Warmaster promised to provide the Mechanicum the lost secrets of the ancient standard template construct, also known as STC technology, that had been recovered from the worlds of the recently subjugated Eurasian technocracy by the Warmaster's Sons of Horus Legion. The Fabricator General was impressed with the Warmaster's gift and admitted that it was a valuable STC database, but he wanted more. Regulus had anticipated this demand and told Kelbor Hall that the Warmaster promised to lift all restrictions on research into those technologies like abominable intelligence, aka AI, that the Emperor had declared forbidden, to cement the alliance between the Mechanicum and the Warmaster and display the traitors' seriousness about their cause. Horus had also provided Regulus with the security protocols required to unlock the infamous Vaults of Moravec. Greedily, the Fabricator General struck the dark bargain, accepting Horus's proposal and willingly joined forces with the Warmaster, assisting the traders with all of the technology of mankind at his disposal. Well, before we go on, what do you think of this guy? Hall, brother?
Hal? Well, I don't think he's a fan of Dave, but regardless. Um here's the thing I kind of wonder about him. I think he's actually right on track with what the Emperor was thinking, but I don't understand what his end game is with Horus. I mean, to me, it seems like he's just trading one dictator for another.
Well, Horus had claimed that what was going to end up happening was he was going to basically return Mars back
Right. No, I understand that, but
to
at the
him. And so it was less of a. I think at this point, the Fabricator General was seeing it as yes, they had their empire, but really they're being watched over all the time and just constantly manipulated. And whereas in theory, under Horus's proposal, it would be they'd be running things.
I understand that if everything went according to plan, that would be the great scheme of everything. But what does he know, anyways, of Horus's track record that would make him go, yeah, he's going to go ahead and do that? That's my wonder.
That's why the Warmaster had to give him so much stuff beforehand.
Right. No, yeah, I get that. But at the same time, anyways, just because you give people stuff, anyways, doesn't mean, anyways, that they're, well, at least smart people, doesn't mean, anyways, that they're going to trust you because of it.
Well, one of the things you have to remember, actually, there's a couple of things. One of them is, and for people that don't know much about the Mechanicum, one of the things that they have, no matter how much you take out of they take out of themselves, is a desire for knowledge.
Right.
And you're dangling in front of them. Look at all this stuff that you could have.
No, I get that, Yuksen. But it still goes back to my question, anyways, which is, what do you think his end game was? Because yes, he's got and Horus is doing a good job buttering him up, anyways, and he's giving him all this stuff, that's going to be this advanced technology. But at the same time, the Fabricator General strikes me as someone, anyways, that uses logic and reason. So while he is getting this stuff, and I can understand the whole greedy lizard mind thing, give it to me. But at the same time, anyways, you'd think he would have some sort of end plan, anyways, if Horus doesn't live up to his end of the deal. Does that make sense?
I think, especially when it comes to the war that's about to happen, I think what he's thinking is by getting this new technology, even if he goes back on his word with everything else, he's feeling they can use this new technology basically to take back what it is that they originally.
I agree with you. I think that's the only play I could see him, anyways, thinking. The problem I have with that is just the simple fact, anyways, that the Imperium at this point is so much larger than it was when the Emperor showed up 200 years beforehand.
Right.
So the concept of actually saying, well, we could take these guys at this point, anyways, to me, anyways, seems fairly far-fetched, even if you have a whole bunch of new technology. I mean, it would have to be pretty potent. I mean,
well,
if you look
on
at
one hand, yes,
Yuksen, hang on half a second. So, I mean, like a good example would be like, for instance, the Eldar, right? They have far more advanced technology than the Imperium at this point, right? They're still losing to the Imperium, though, because there's just so many more humans.
Right.
So I figured, anyways, it's got to be kind of the same thing, anyways, with the Mechanicum at this point, right? Even if they get technology beyond their wildest dreams, I mean, they're still going to be stuck in the same situation where it's like, okay, well, we have two really powerful dudes, but they've got, 5 million of them against me. They're going to take us down eventually. So I just don't understand, anyways, why the thought process has changed at this point, where they're just like, oh, we can take them. I just don't think they have the resources to do it.
Well, there's two things. One is the fact that who's supplying the Imperium with all their stuff? The Mechanicum.
Right.
So I assume part of it's just like, well, if we have to, we can just cut all. Yeah, you may have your stuff for now, but we can wear you out because we'll still have stuff, but you won't really be able to replenish your stuff.
Well, that is an interesting gamble. It's like, okay, let's see anyways if we can we can hold them off long enough for them to run out of ammunition.
Plus,
I don't like
the
that
idea of some of this, well, who said that they were strategists? They really aren't. The other factor is the fact that supposedly with this new technology, you could have far superior weapons to be able to take a beating. Plus, it's Mars, which was already basically its own fortress.
Right. But it's one against billions. I think maybe another part of this, I know that you said anyways, that the mechanical part of his mind that had to deal with pride anyways has long disappeared. To me, I'm thinking that there's a little piece of that still left over.
Well, I don't necessarily think that it's pride so much as greed.
Well, yeah, I think greed has a huge part of it because, like I said, the lizard brain. I want to give it to me, But at the same time, thinking anyways farther ahead, it's like, okay, so what if Horus does betray me? Which is fairly likely because, as we know, I mean, he's already betrayed his dad. So what makes me any different? So if you're thinking that far down the road, the only way that he could possibly think, he's got to be thinking anyways, a little bit anyways, egotistically here, right? I'm better than Horus, so I should be able to beat him.
I think, well, there's a couple of things based off of this. One is even though supposedly he doesn't have emotion, he really does have emotion because he still has angst against the Emperor. But the other thing is, and this is one of the weird things that the Emperor did, and I don't know why he did it.
Yuksen.
He went, okay, so the Emperor's just like, we'll discuss more about the vaults later, but he lets Hall know what the stuff is in there. What's in there.
Well, he kind of does, and that's actually kind of interesting. And before we do actually go on, we do kind of have to talk about the Vaults of Moravec. So real quick, anyways, if you could hold on to that thought, anyways, I think it'll actually make more. And I know I understand where you're going, Yuksen, but I don't know if everybody else listening is going to understand this unless they know what the Vaults of Moravec actually are. Well, I mean, we can both agree that the Vaults of Moravec have been created especially to harbor the researches and data obtained by the ill-reputed techno-savant Moravec. I mean, okay, so now Moravec had been a technical genius way back when, but he was way ahead of his technology of his time. I mean, we're talking about like he was around the time before the Unification Wars. So we're going way back in the Wayback Machine. He also intimately believed that technology would eventually surpass human intellect, and that by technological means, he would be able to create this singularity, the fusion of machine and man, that would surpass both. These beliefs essentially mirror the Mechanicum's creed that one day this fusion between man and machine, the Omnissiah, the machine god, would reveal itself to them, which is why Moravec was also considered an important prophet of the Mechanicum. However, Moravec would not be content to wait for the coming of the Omnissiah, as he had heralded it, but actually tried to bring it forth, gathering like-minded tech adepts in what was officially branded as a sect known as the Brotherhood of Singularitism. Moravec continued his work. As would be later discovered, Moravec had made unholy pacts with beings far more ancient than mankind, mingling his race's science with the raw elemental forces of the ether to create technologies far in advance of anything seen on Terra, with the influence of perhaps the gods of chaos, or at the very least one or more of the powerful Neverborn. Moravec created technical wonders. Machines freed the shackles of physics and human understandings of the universe, warp-powered devices which did the impossible and fearful, truly devastating weapon systems that made the atomic devices of the past pale in comparison. Now, these powers naturally bred suspicion and hatred with the more secular warlords that still ruled Terra during that time. Feeling threatened, one of these warlords, the warlord Khazar, united the Pan-Pacific tribes and stormed Moravec's citadel, branding him a witch, but ultimately failing to kill him. This happened, like I said, well before the Unification Wars, as Khazar was himself actually vanquished by Narthan Doom, one of the mightiest rivals of the Emperor during his conquest of mankind's home world during the Unification Wars. But Managing to escape, Moravok fled to Mars, where his story finishes. Upon his death, all his works and knowledge were entered, presumably with him, into the vaults that still carry his name today.
Okay, well, that's interesting, but we already discussed this in our Vox, the Great Crusade. During the Treaty of Mars, the Emperor listed a number of machines and technological concepts that could lead to the combination of technology with sorcery of chaos, and ordered those subjects to be considered taboo and not to be researched by the tech priests under pain of execution, since many such forbidden technologies already existed in various magi-forged cities or lay hidden underneath the sands of Mars. The Emperor ordered the ruling fabricator general of the Mechanicum to seal all such devices within a special cache that only he or his trusted representatives could open, known as the Vaults of Moravec.
Yes, I know we said that, and it's chronicled very well in many imperial documents. Yet other documents say otherwise.
Explain.
Well, it is said for an entire millennium the vaults remained locked, even when the Emperor trod the soil of Mars and visited the maze of tunnels in the company of Kelbor Hall. He didn't dare open the mighty door that closed the vaults. Rightly suspecting that the ambitious Kelbor Hall would not heed his words, the Emperor psychically wiped the Fabricator General's cartographic memory buffers, so that Kelbor Hall would indeed know of the hidden knowledge of its existence, but would never be able to find it on his own.
Ah, I see. We have stumbled upon a flaw in the historical documents.
Precisely. And it's not something that happens every day.
So, which is it?
Well, I've got an idea anyways, but you were kind of already brainstorming before we actually got to this. So what do you think first?
Okay, so in one reference of this, they refer to them.
Actually, real quick, I do have a question for you. Was Kelbor Hall? Was he the Fabricator General during the Treaty of Mars, or was it somebody else? I know he was around at the time. I just don't know if he was actually the Fabricator General at the time.
I don't think he was at the time.
I don't think he was either. I think he was just a magi, right?
Right.
I mean, he was working his way up. Okay, so just so that people don't get confused, when he was walking with the Emperor anyways down to the vaults, he wasn't the Fabricator General at the time. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
So in some documentations, they refer to, like, when talking about the technology from the region technocracy that had been locked away. They were locked in what was called Martian vaults of forbidden technology instead of, but the Martian vaults of forbidden technology has also been referenced under the name of the Vaults of Moravec.
Well, hang on half a second. So some of these things, like for instance, the STC that you were talking about from, where was it? The technocracy.
Technocracy.
Yeah, if I recall right, anyways, that was on a different Forge world, wasn't it? I mean, at this point,
no, I'm talking about things like that. Not.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying that one specifically. I was like, wait a minute. I thought that was found somewhere else.
No.
Okay, yeah, and because if I recall right, anyways, the STCs, anyways, are from the Dark Age of technology, and they're like all over the universe. There's all sorts of them all over the place.
Yeah, and there probably is some that are in the Martian vaults.
Yeah, that wouldn't shock me either. But I mean, it's I think Mechanicum is still trying to find them, right?
I think Gaunt and his ghosts ended up coming across one of them.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, so they're still trying to find him in the 42nd millennium.
Yeah.
But so okay. So you're saying that these are also known as the Vaults of Mars. What's your point? I guess
the point is that it seems more like this description here, when they're referred to as the Martian vaults of forbidden technology, gives more of an aspect of, okay, it isn't just the original vault of
more of
but also other vaults that forbidden technology had been thrown into.
Right. Which was actually going to come up to my hypothesis, which is that the Vault of Moravec, when, like, for instance, we just talked about anyways, the Emperor shows up, he doesn't even open the doors. But we've got this other explanation. Is like, well, he shoved a bunch of stuff in there. Well, I think what happened was that they never opened these doors. They just added to it and made new doors that were closed, and only the emperor and his closest advisors could open. That sounds like actually what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Kind of the same
And
concept.
then he does the brilliant thing of just wiping out how to get there, not what's there.
Right. Yeah, I don't know why he I don't know why he did it that way. It, to me anyways, it would seem more, especially if he's already at this point not really trusting of Calvor Hall.
Well, I think this is a mindset though, like I said before, the majority of the Mechanicum have this mindset of knowledge,
right?
Technology comes first before anything else.
Which I know I think I might have mentioned before anyways, but it's just to me anyways weird that the Mechanicum and Magnus never got along. Just on the concept, because they think exactly the same thing pretty much. Knowledge is supreme. Well, I understand they're going about it differently. What's that?
You want to know the main difference?
Well, I do know what the main difference is, but
science versus magic. Yeah.
I am a wizard. I am a scientist. Yeah, I gotcha. But if you look at the way that they look at the world, it's almost identical, though. It's like knowledge is
irreconcilable differences.
Well, anyways, to get back to the schism, it didn't take long for Hal to reopen the vaults. And inside were all manner of forbidden arcane knowledge and weaponry that had obviously been tainted by the corrupting influence of chaos stored within. Soon the corruption spread throughout the forges and temples across the Red Planet as scrap code. Scrap code is chaos-contaminated digital source code that was infected with an arcane computer virus. This infested the logistacks and cogitators, also known as computers, archives of the Mechanicum, causing literal chaos to emerge in any cogitator system that was networked to one of these infected counterparts. It's like the best way to describe this would be the worst virus you could possibly think of. Someone drops in the internet and it just is so contagious and nothing can stop it. It hits every single computer on Terran 42. It would be terrible. Although this is significantly worse. I'll describe it here in a second. As a result of the scrap code infestation, communication across the world and off-planet was severely disrupted, and many essential industries were sabotaged. A period of general confusion followed, which the Fabricator General and his allies used to marshal their forces, intent on making sure the whole of Mars was firmly under their rule. This proved to be more difficult than they had at first anticipated. Several regions of Mars remained relatively uninfected by the scrap code, insulated against the assault by their early adoption of a new, far more secure digital information network technology called the Noosphere. Among these regions were the forges of Corel Zeth, Implovian Maximal, and Fabricator Locum Zygurus Kane, who would go on to become the leader of those tech priests who chose to remain loyal to the Emperor and resisted being drawn into Kelbor Hall's so-called Dark Mechanicum. Well, the opening shots had already been fired when the Kaban machines of Lucas Krom destroyed a plasma reactor complex belonging to the loyalist adept Implovian Maximal. It still took a short while before open civil war began. As he still required some pretense to unleash war against the loyalists, Kelbor Hall and his allies attempted to provoke those unwilling to join them, employing various acts of sabotage, assassination, and outright aggression to eliminate those who were unwilling to join their cause. One example of these tactics was when the Dark Mechanicum aligned Legio Mortis attempted to goad the Legio Tempestus into opening fire first by entering Tempestus's territory and refusing to answer hails. Eventually, the pretense Kelbor Hall required was given to him by the techno-magi Coriel Zeth, the mistress of the Forge world known as Magma City, when she declared she no longer believed the machine god existed, though she remained loyal to the Emperor and his goals for mankind, as technology was developed through the application of science and reason, not blind faith. The Dark Mechanicum used her apostasy against the sacred doctrines of the cult Mechanicus to declare her and her supporters heretics and unleash an assault against Magma City, bringing war to Mars as those pledged to Kelbor Hall, and Horus attacked those determined to remain allied to Terra and the Emperor. Magma City would soon become a focal point in the struggle for those among the Mechanicum who remained loyal to the Emperor as the Omnissiah and his Imperium. Later histories would record that the first blow of the Martian Civil War was struck against Magos Matthias Khafra, whose forge in the Sinius Sabias region was housed with the Madla crater. Titans of the Legio Magna marched from the southern Nochias region and within solar minutes had smashed down the gates of Khafra's forge. Howling god engines, daubed in red, orange, yellow, and black, and decorated with flaming horn skull devices, ran amok within the high walls of the crater, crushing everything living beneath them and destroying thousands of standard years of accumulated wisdom in a fury of fire. Vast libraries burned, and weapon shops that served the Imperial Army regiments of the Solar Guard were reduced to molten slag as the indiscriminate slaughter continued long into the night. The Magna's legions' trumpeting war horns sounded like the primal screams of primitive savages. Further north, in the Arabian region of Mars, the great god engine's fabrication yards of High Magos Ahotep in the Cassiner crater were struck by hundreds of thermonuclear missiles launched from the atomic silos, secreted within the isolated peaks of the mesas of Nilocertus. The explosions of the forbidden weapons filled the 415-kilometer diameter of the crater with seething nuclear fire and sent conjoined magma-streaked mushroom clouds soaring nearly 70 miles into the sky. Along the borders of the Lunae Palaius and Arcadia regions, what previously had been simply heated debate between the partisans of the Emperor and the Warmaster erupted into outright warfare, as Princeps Erlich of the Deathstalkers unleashed his god engines upon the fortress of Maxen Vledigid's Legio Honorum. Caught by surprise, the Legio Honorum lost 19 Titans in the first solar hour of battle, before withdrawing into the frozen wastes of the Mar Boreum and seeking refuge in the dune fields of the Olympia Unda. Their calls for reinforcement went unanswered, for all of Mars was tearing itself apart as the plague of war spread across the planet in a raging firestorm. Amid the Athabasca valleys, the war machine of the Legio Ignatum and the Burning Stars Titan Legion fought in bloody close quarters through the teardrop landforms caused by catastrophic flooding in an earlier ancient age of the Red Planet. Neither force would gain the advantage, nor could either claim victory. So after a night's undignified scrapping, both withdrew to lick their wounds. At Fabricator Locum Kane's forge, the Mondus Oculum, the outlying forge, cogitators, and logic engines had clogged with corrupted data, howling ghosts of sourceless machine noise, and dangerous code packets of infected algorithms that many of the most advanced protective Aegis protocols were helpless to defeat. Only Kane's swift action to shut down the input-output highways, and the fact that the vast majority of his systems had recently been upgraded to take advantage of Corel Zeth's revolutionary system of new spheric data transfers, had spared them the worst of the attack, for an attack it surely had been. Kelbor Hall himself soon unleashed his twisted Scutari and combat servitors on the forges of Umpluvian Maximal. Maximal was able to repel the first wave of attackers, but within solar hours, he was totally besieged by unique Ordinatus war machines. At the Herschel impact basin of Mar Tyrrhenium, 900,000 Scutari and protectors clashed in a bloody melee that continued until nearly all were dead. The single greatest loss of life in a single battle of the conflict took place on the Ismenus Lacus Forge city, after Dark Mechanicum forces unleashed virus bombs on the settlement, killing 14 million people within only solar minutes. The apocalyptic conflict was not limited to the surface of Mars, and high above in the planet's orbital shipyards, traitor void ships exchanged fire with the loyalist counterparts after forcing the vessels of the battle fleet Solar to withdraw. During one of these exchanges, the Arch Mechanicus Mechanicum Glorion was destroyed by Dark Mechanicum frigates and crashed into the Basilica and the blessed algorithm of Mars itself. The crash annihilated millions of square kilometers and killed billions of people across the planet. The Magma City soon became a focal point for the resistance, with both the Legio Tempestus and the Knights of the House Tyrannus coming to Coriel Zeth's aid. Defending against the chaos-fueled power of the Dark Mechanicum proved a difficult business, and soon not only Zeth's Forge, but those Maximal and even Cain found themselves effectively surrounded and besieged by their enemy. A vicious battle erupted at Magma City, led by the Legio Mortis and its Imperator-class Titan Aquila Ignis. However, the traitor Titan's legions' attack on Magma City was blunted when lava overran the traitor ranks, and most of the Titans of the Legio Mortis, including the Aquila Ignis, were destroyed by the Legio Tempestus. But despite the victory at Magma City, the situation remained dire for the outnumbered and outgunned Loyalist forces across the planet. Similar instances of open warfare eventually erupted all across the Red Planet, as Martian forces, both civilian and military, fought one another in a deadly escalating civil war, in which the destruction unleashed on Mars mirrored the unfolding in a wider galaxy between Loyalist and traitor forces. Now, Yuksen, what does the Imperium have to say about this? Are they sending anybody?
It's like, no!
They're like, you're on your own! You wanted to be autonomous, right? Good luck! Sorry. So who are they sending?
Well, in the opening days of the Horus Heresy, when the Schism of Mars erupted, open warfare raged across the Red Planet between forces of the Loyalist Mechanicus and the traitors of Dark Mechanicus. Malcador the Sigillite, the Regent of Terra, charged the Primarch Rogal Dorn with the mission of vital importance to secure the forges of Mars. Dorn informed the Sigillite he would send first Captain Sigismund and 4 companies of Imperial Fists to carry out the task.
Oh, it's Siggy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's like, sure, I'll do it.
Siggy's actually pretty cool.
Siggy.
Sorry. Captain Sigismund is actually pretty cool. But sorry, carry on.
It's like, sure, I'll do it. Sigismund, I got a job for you.
He's like, Siggy, go do this. Fine, but stop calling me Siggy. Sorry. That would be if Dorn actually had a sense of humor, which I don't think he's very well known for. Sorry. Carry on, sir.
The forges of Mondus Oculum and Mondus Gamma produced the bulk of the armor and weapons of the Astartes. You'd have them strike there first, and when they were in Loyalist hands, the Imperial Fist would push outwards and secure the others. For those still loyal to the Emperor on the Red Planet, their salvation arrived in the form of a great Imperial expeditionary fleet. And so Dorn sent his first captain along with 4 companies of Imperial Fists and a large force of Imperial Army soldiers to secure the forges of Mars. Sigismund's companies landed at Mondus Oculum as the rest of the Imperial Expeditionary Force was fighting all across the surface of Mars. After a rapid deployment under fire in the shadow of the caldera of the great volcano Pavonus Mons, 13 companies of the Imperial Army's Saturnine hoplites advanced on the traitors' lines surrounding the forge of Epluvian Maximal. Further south, 2 companies of Imperial Fists and 4 regiments of Jovian Grenadiers, nearly 15,000 Imperial Army soldiers in total, under the command of the Imperial Fists captain Camba Diaz, made planetfall in the Mondus Gamma Forge complex. Unfortunately, nothing of the Imperial Fist mission to Mars went as expected. Camba Diaz and the Jovian regiments soon became embroiled in a fight for their lives at Mondus Gamma Forge. The Saturnine hoplite companies tasked with breaking the siege at Epluvian Maximal's forge were repeatedly turned back by the horrifyingly altered weapon creatures of the Dark Mechanicum. Though the fighting was desperate, Camba Diaz eventually secured the armor forges and the ammunition silos, but his company was outnumbered 100 to 1. The traitor Magos Lucas Crom's troops pushed him back to the landing fields as losses were grievous. Sigismund soon grasped that the Imperial Expeditionary Force would not be able to hold the forge as planned, but a great deal of essential supplies had still been secured for transit to Terra. Sigismund's company had descended upon Mondus Oculum, not knowing whether they would have to fight to secure the forge. But it was a relief to find that fabricator Locum Kane still held true to the Emperor. Sigismund secured vast quantities of munitions for shipment to Terra, including nearly 12,000 suits of Mark IV power armor and twice as many weapons. But the Loyalists had run out of time. Despite the Locum servitors working at full capacity, it still was not fast enough to load the bulk transports. For Sigismund's void ship masters informed him of a sizable enemy force closing in, composed of traitor infantry, armor, Scutari, and at least 2 Titan legions comprising of 60 war engines in total. Sigismund's desire to wreak a bloody vengeance on those who rebelled against the Emperor warred with the mission his Primarch had given him of securing the armor and weapons of Kane's forge. Reluctantly, he knew he must stay true to the mission, for the forces arrayed against them were too many, and his orders did not allow for futile gestures of defiance. Locum Kane warned the Imperial Fist's first captain that if both the Mundus Oculum and Mundus Gamma forges fell, the Imperium would have no way of replenishing the combat losses they would sustain against the traitors in any meaningful way. After barely a few solar hours worth of fighting, both Mundus Oculum and Mundus Gamma were burning, with great swaths of their industrial machines and manufacturing capacity destroyed. The loss of such irreplaceable technology and knowledge for all time would be felt by the Imperium for many millennia to come. Then, like comets launching from the surface of Mars, the Imperial landing ships fled into the heavens. The Astartes and Imperial army vessels jostled in the sky in their haste to depart the Red Planet. Barely 1,000 Loyalist warriors were able to escape from the planet's surface before the Manufactoria fell into the hands of the traitors. The desperate rearguard action of the Astartes and other Loyalists on Mars and the sacrifice of many thousands of lives at least had secured tens of thousands of suits of newly fabricated Mark IV, Mark V, and Mark VI Space Marine power armor and other vital material that would ultimately prove to be the edge the forces of the Imperium needed in the campaign against the traitor legions of Horus Lupercal.
Well, brother, things are not looking good for the Imperium. Not only have they lost 3 legions of Space Marines, but they lose Mars as well. This is a heavy blow for the Imperium because they will be cut off from all their armaments for the duration of the heresy. Mars was officially lost to the traitors for the remainder of said Horus Heresy. Well, rather, before we take our leave, what do you think of this debacle as a whole? And how do you think it could have been avoided from the beginning?
Actually followed through with your promises?
What do you mean?
Well, in theory, the idea behind the treaty was to treat the other people kind of equal.
Well, they were supposed to kind of give them very much autonomy. That was the big deal about it.
Yes, and as you could see, he really did that, didn't he?
Well, he started out that way. But like I said, anyways, I think as the Emperor started, and I think Fabricator Hal, anyways, was right on top of this. I think he kind of figured out, anyways, what the Emperor was planning on doing. Was by the time the end of the Great Crusade, anyways, he was really going to fully take over the Mechanicum. I mean, I think that was originally his plot the entire time. So
yeah, which is why, like I said, first thing that would stop is actually following through with what you originally had written down,
or do it sooner.
Yeah.
I mean, if you'd already conquered the Mechanicum at this point, then no Horus Heresy. Or not no Horus Heresy, but no Schism of Mars at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, to actually stop this from actually happening, I don't know how they could have done this, how the Emperor could have done this a whole lot better other than reacting faster to it. I mean,
maybe wiping the person's entire memory.
We're just killing Hal anyways. Like, crap, he wasn't supposed to see this. Well, you know.
But then he probably has some sort of recording built in his body somewhere.
Or something. Yeah, it would be something else. I know. We're kind of... It's always, anyways, you can always look back in history and be like, well, how did we avoid this? It's like, well, if you did this, this, and this, it could have worked. But that's the problem with history. You can't really change things once it's already happened. But I don't know how they could have drastically changed it. I do think, anyways, the response to me, anyways, by the Imperium was pretty weak. They sent 4 companies of Imperial fists, and that's it. Not even a Primarch.
Well, that's Dorn's fault.
Malcolm Dorn is like, handle this, Dorn, and he's like, right, I'm gonna stay here, and I'm gonna have Siggy take care of it. But
I think part of it was, if I remember correctly, Rogal Dorn felt that.
Well, okay. Well, first off, I think Rogal Dorn's the only, and his legions are the only ones in the Sol system at this point, right?
I don't know, maybe.
I don't think the White Scars have shown up, and
No,
definitely the Blood Angels haven't.
They had to use that device, remember, that was basically
right.
The prototype. Well, wasn't the prototype? It was the basis of the Golden Throne.
So that's why, anyways, I guess the force seems to be significantly smaller than I would have anticipated. But then again, if he's the only one there, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. Okay, never mind.
Plus, if I remember right, he was actually working on. I think he had more of a focus on we need to get prepared for an attack on Terra.
Right, Horus's invasion.
Mind you, the fact that everything only lasted hours. Just saying, Dorn.
Go ahead.
Dorn, I'm pretty sure could at least have found some way to clear out his schedule a little.
Maybe I'm just looking into this a little bit too much, but honestly, I figured this would be a larger priority than it seems that it was, I guess. And who knows? Maybe, I mean, I know we talk about the loss of Mars and the ammunition and armaments. Maybe there were other places in the Sol system that I just haven't read into that also was still producing stuff. So that way it's not as big of a deal. Because, I mean, they do literally shut down Mars after this. I mean, I didn't explain this quite yet, but they do put a blockade up on Mars, right?
Well, I know that they don't get anything from Mars anymore.
Right. Well, no. What I mean is they put up a blockade so that even the Dark Mechanicum can't send forces out against them. Right. They do send out a blockade, and it's not until I think Horus reaches the Sol system that blockade disappears.
It sounds like something that would be done.
Right. So I would just guess anyways that there are other places anyways that are producing armaments and stuff. Because if that was like the only place, it's kind of like, well, yeah, you need to take that back over. Because there'd be nothing worse anyways if Horus shows up and you've got empty guns.
Well, I think because there were other Forge worlds, maybe they were still getting some shipments from there.
Right. And I just don't know if there were any anyways in the Sol system itself or places close enough that they could continue getting reinforced. There had to have been. I mean, because like I was just saying, if it was literally anyways, this was the only place, then yes, this should have been like top priority because like I said, if Horus shows up anyways, it's like, well, what do we got to go against him? We have sticks, pointy sticks, Well, that's not going to do well. So maybe this is a little bit blown out of proportion in my opinion, but I mean, it's definitely very important to Horus that he holds on anyways to Mars. And when he gets anyways into the Sol system, I mean, they become pretty decent boon to him, if I recall right. Well, do you have any other thoughts anyways on the Schism of Mars, sir?
No.
Well, folks, that be it for this week. Join us next week as we discuss the end of this debacle, the Siege of Terra. Oh, and don't forget that we will be doing our Q&A live at 6:30 Pacific Standard Time this Saturday.
Neato. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this box. Feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and comment. And don't forget to check out the shop. We got some cool stuff there, like clothes, pillows, and hats.
Yep, and don't forget the rabbits, Yuksen.
Right, and don't forget the rabbits.
Have a great day, and as always,
Until next time, this is Zeckthar.
and Yuksen.
Signing off.